Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Beth A. Miller. Beth A. Miller is a CEO of Executive Velocity, a top talent and leadership development advisory firm. Beth is a trusted executive consultant, Vistage chair emeritus, and committed volunteer. She is certified in Myers-Briggs, Hogan, and Business DNA. She is a certified managerial coach by Kennesaw University. Beth's insight and expertise have made her a sought-after speaker on hiring, leadership development, and succession planning. Her book, Are You Talent Obsessed?, was published in 2014 and is available on Amazon. She is a frequent contributor to Entrepreneurial Online, About.com, and Talent Culture, to name a few. She is a graduate of Babson College and Harvard Business School's OPM program. To learn more about Beth, go to her website, executivevelocity.com. Welcome to the podcast, Beth.
Well, thank you so much. I've really been looking forward to this.
Yes, and I'm excited to hear about all this and really interested also in some of the business aspects. There's so many, I'm a small business person, and I know so many times small business people, they love what they do, but they have no exit strategy. So I'm very excited to hear about your experience with that.
Okay.
So just so
Yeah.
people get,
Yeah. I mean, exit strategy. I've worked with a. Oh, you know what? We're breaking up here.
Mhm.
I've got unstable. I can't hear you.
You can't hear me? No?
Oh, now I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry. So could you say that again?
Yes. So I was really interested in hearing about how you're talking to small business owners and business owners about the exit strategy.
Yeah. So most of my work is around succession planning, which comes actually way before exit planning, or hopefully comes way before exit planning.
Mm-hmm.
Succession planning is really about an annual process of identifying your key positions and making sure that you have people in line to backfill those positions should you have somebody that leaves or, God forbid, dies. But that position is now open, and if you're doing succession planning properly, you've got somebody ready to fill that spot.
Exactly. Wonderful. So just so people can get to know you, why don't you tell us about you, where you grew up, how you started out, how you got to be doing what you're doing now?
Oh gosh, well, the abridged version is that I grew up in the Boston area and in Concord, Massachusetts, and went to college at Babson College, which was basically right down the street. It was about a half hour away, and majored in finance. I was good at math in high school and thought, well, gee, I'll be a finance major. What I found out was I was good at it, but I really didn't have a passion for it. So I was in finance for about 5 years, working for Digital Equipment Corporation at the time, which is no longer. And they, at the time, were having a program where they trained internal people to become salespeople. So I was accepted into the program, and that's how I got to Atlanta, was through that program. Mm-hmm. Kind of fast forward, one of my talent management leadership kind of aha moments was way back when I was working in my last position for digital, and that was that people don't leave companies, they leave managers. And I had a manager who was terrible, to put it frankly. So I would have stayed with the company, but I didn't have any opportunities locally, and I really enjoyed Atlanta. So my option was to leave the company, and I ended up working for Coopers & Lybrand in their technology practice. Had gotten married during that time frame, and my husband started an accounting temporary services firm. He, after 2 years, he convinced me that I should leave and start a consulting practice that was technology related. So we actually ran the two for several years and then sold the accounting temporary services business, and quickly became Inc. 500, fastest growing companies here in Atlanta, and then sold in 2003. I was in my 40s at the time, so I took some time off, but I couldn't retire. I mean, I was bored, and there wasn't enough volunteer work to do. So I found Vistage, which is a CEO membership organization, and I was a chair for 13 years. During that time, I worked with small, mid-sized companies and business owners, founders, CEOs, and helped them grow their business. And the program was a kind of advisory board meeting once a month where members would get together. I would facilitate the meeting, and they would get advice on strategic issues from other members. And then the other part of the program was coaching. So each member I met with every month, and the conversations ranged from, business issues. It could be, cash flow or, financial. It could be marketing, but a lot of it had to do with the business owner and his or her leadership, and how do they perform in a way that will empower others. How will they develop their talent so that they can work more on the business and not in the business, which is what I find a lot of small business owners are kind of trapped in. And that is they're so in the weeds that they cannot get out and kind of see the big picture and spend time strategizing and looking towards the future.
Yeah, and that makes total sense to me, because I know when I first started my optometry practice, I mean, I had some employees, but I was doing a lot of things, being the doctor and trying to do that strategy and raising 3 small children. So
yeah, exactly.
Yes. Do you work with business owners where they're trying to balance that child business aspect?
Yeah, not so much. Most of my clients are at an age where their kids have grown, and then there have other clients where I'm really not working with them. I'm working with their managers. So some of those individuals are having that balancing issue, but they don't have all the other responsibilities that a business owner has.
Exactly.
Right. It's they don't have the stress of, making payroll, especially during this COVID situation. I mean, there's a lot more stress that I see on business owners today than 6 months ago.
Oh, definitely, because the income is not coming in, but they still have their employees, and it's the balance of, I've heard some companies paying their employees, some companies just kind of leaving their, employees out in the cold. So depending on their cash flow. So so when you're working with people as far as leadership, what are some of the things about leadership that makes a good leader or makes a good manager?
Well, there's a difference between leaders and managers. Management's about process and policies, etc. Leadership is about people. So what I always say is great leaders are about not themselves, but others. And they are about developing future leaders. So that's what a great leader is. They obviously, need to inspire and motivate to get people to follow them. They need to have a big vision. They need to be really committed to that vision. They need to be really purposeful. There are things that many leaders don't do that I think they should do on a kind of regular basis. Those things are like asking for feedback from others.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to give feedback, but asking for feedback from direct reports, what can I be doing differently, especially in today's world, where there are a lot of employees out there who are anxious and fearful. Making sure that you understand their needs. In fact, I was just reading an article where the question you shouldn't be asking is, how are you doing? That is such a generic question. Mm-hmm. You need to be more purposeful about asking a question and being more specific. So what can I be doing differently to help you? What are some of the things that you need to be doing that will help you? Those are the questions versus how you doing? Well, I mean, if you're asked that question, what would your response be?
Yeah, good.
Right, exactly. Right, exactly. No, there may be some people that will go on and on about how awful life is, but for the most part, they're going to say good. Yeah, I'm doing fine. Mm-hmm. So you get really more specific about the questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really helpful. And what are your thoughts on, like you said, leaders developing leaders? So I know some companies, they just train people, like if they have a new software or something, they're going to train them on that, of course. But there's some companies that they really don't give people any self-development type of anything that will make them better, if you will, right, except for processes. And then there's some that they do so much self-development, and there's people move up and their people are happy. What is your take on that?
So their development comes in all sorts of flavors. As it relates to developing future leaders, mm-hmm, a lot of that is those soft skills. So things like communications, team building, managing conflict. Those are things that leaders need to have in their toolbox before they become a leader. What I find with smaller companies is they get confused between high performers and high potentials. So they've got somebody who is a great software engineer, and he's great at his craft of what he does, and he's a high performer. And the leader then will immediately go, gosh, Joe is great. He's a great software engineer. We need to have a lead now. We've got enough software engineers. We need somebody to lead the software engineers. Mm-hmm. Let's promote Joe. Well, poor Joe doesn't have the skills to lead. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean he doesn't have the capacity to learn. Mm-hmm. But he might also not want to lead. Mm-hmm. Many of those, like scientists and engineers, they love their craft and they want to improve on that craft. And the idea of leading others is scary, because all of a sudden their attention and time is going to be taken away from their craft, yeah, and required on people and developing relationships and stuff. So one of the things I always encourage leaders to have are those career conversations with everybody to understand, who's really aspiring to be a leader.
Yeah.
Right. And are they taking on, and looking for opportunities to grow? They may want to go and get a higher position, but if they don't have the behaviors, they're not showing the potential, mm-hmm, to move up.
That makes sense. And do the personality tests, like the Myers-Briggs and some of the other ones that you use, are those part of that piece where you're looking to see what their actual natural personality type is?
So there's a number of ways of assessing your employees for future potential. One is a personality assessment. I actually, most recently over the last 5 or 6 years, used Business DNA, which is actually a local tool here in Atlanta that came out of Georgia Tech. The research came out of Georgia Tech.
Mhm.
And I chose to go down that path because Myers-Briggs, which I am certified in as well, is not validated for hiring purposes. And I was looking for a tool that I could use and companies could use from cradle to grave, that they could use it in the hiring process and then use it in the development process as well. So Business DNA, what it does is it measures your natural talents and tendencies. It doesn't measure adapted. Adapted, it comes through experience, etc. So that is one assessment that I use. If the company is large enough, I'll use a 360 assessment so that the individual will self-assess, and then you will get ratings from your manager, from your peers, from your direct reports. So there's the 360. But in order to do a 360, you need to understand internally what your core competencies are within the organization. And that takes an effort. I mean, usually that's one of the reasons I'm oftentimes called in, is to help them create a core competency model. And it's not a full-fledged model like a lot of large companies. I mean, core competency models can be very expensive. What I've done is I've kind of dumbed it down to a listing that is more beneficial to smaller companies and isn't overkill. Because number one, once you build a model, you got to maintain it. You got to train the managers on how to use it, and it can get very complex. So you need to understand what those core competencies are, and those core competencies oftentimes are tied back to your business values. I've never walked into a company that didn't have business values. What I've walked into is they have their values, but they're not clear on what behaviors support those values.
Yes.
So if somebody says integrity, well, what does that mean? Or customer service, what does that mean? So we spend time uncovering what are those behaviors that are supporting your values. And those behaviors are not only great for assessing employees, but they're also great in integrating into the hiring process. That if you understand what those competencies are that align with your values, you can have questions, behavioral interviewing questions, that will uncover whether or not that person has demonstrated that in the past.
Wow. Yeah. And that sounds great, because I've heard hire slow, fire fast. In other words, things aren't going well and you see there's not going somewhere. So.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And the assessments are, will help take some of the bias out of the hiring process. And there's a lot of bias that can take place that are unconscious to you, that you don't realize as a hiring manager. Oftentimes, you'll connect with somebody because they're like you.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Definitely. Yes.
Exactly. Or you find out in the interview that they garden and so don't you. So you're creating a positive bias there, and oftentimes are not really focusing on some of the other areas that could be a problem in performance.
That makes total sense. And it could go the other way too, where there's something about their background that you don't like, and bias the other way.
Right, exactly. And that's called the horn effect, where they actually you hone in on something that's negative. Right.
So if you find someone that you think is going to be the next leader in a certain position? Do you ever use like shadowing, where they're shadowing the next person, or where they're, if that person were to leave, they're going to take their place, or they're going to know their job? How do you get someone ready for that?
Yeah, so I mean, clearly shadowing is one technique, especially as it relates to taking on a specific position. But the other thing is, once you understand those core competencies, there might be areas that gaps that need to be filled. So you need to figure out how to fill those gaps, and they might not be skills related. So coaching, mentoring are two great techniques to use. I know a number of companies who use mentors to not only help with succession planning, but also for onboarding new employees. So those are two good techniques.
Nice.
Yeah.
So by having these backup people, if you will, if the company is going forward, and let's say the owners of the company want to exit, there's someone to take their place. There's people in positions lined up, so that's I would think that would be a lot more attractive to someone who's coming in to either buy the business.
Exactly. It can definitely increase value of the organization. One of the terms that I use for business owners is that they need to become replaceable. And for many business owners, that's hard because they have built the company and their whole persona is the company. And oftentimes I will have conversations, and these conversations can take many sessions and over many months to get the business owner to understand what it looks like on the other side. What do they plan on doing with their extra time? One of the most successful succession plans that I worked with, the gentleman knew that in like 3 or 4 years he wanted to retire and to sell the business. And so he had identified the VP of sales to be his successor. And over those 3 years, as the successor became more and more qualified to take that role on, the CEO owner spent less and less time in the office. So by the time that it came to selling, he was only in the office 1 day a week. That was it. So it was a much easier transition for him than a lot of owners where they sell the business and they're working the normal 50, 60 hours a week. And then it's like, well, now what do I do?
Exactly. And when they want to sell, the people buying also look at that and they say, okay, we're going to have to, above what you're showing us as far as your numbers, we're going to have to pay someone to take that position. Because I know as a business owner, we do so much more than we pay ourselves for most of the time. Because we love it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And but one of the roadblocks that I've run into is the CEO founder has bought into succession planning, that it's important. They've hired somebody, but they keep sticking their fingers in the pie, and they disempower the person that they've hired or promoted. And people end up leaving. They get frustrated. It's like, wait a minute, you hired me to do this job, but yet you keep sticking your fingers in the pie.
Yeah, that would be really frustrating for the person. And I understand as a in a medical field, as a business owner, with my experience and everything, I think I'm the best. I think nobody can do the job like me. So it's so hard to let go of that, because in some ways it's true, because the experience, you only get experience by doing.
Yes, but I would also say that once you learn how to do that, if you've got the right people in place,
Mhm.
they're going to have different ideas that might be better than yours.
That is so true. That is so true. Yeah. So talk a little bit about emotional intelligence as far as building businesses.
Ooh, wow. Okay. Um, yeah, well, emotional intelligence is highly correlated to leadership success.
Mhm.
And, you know, it is a way of measuring your ability to understand your own emotions and manage your own emotions and build social relationships that are effective. Um, those individuals that demonstrate emotional intelligence can get a lot more out of people
Mhm.
because they emotional intelligence is situational. You need to understand what that other person needs from you as a leader,
Mhm.
and the person down the hall is going to need something different because their personality profile is different.
Yes.
So it's being adaptable
Mhm.
as a leader. The good thing about emotional intelligence is that you can improve it.
Mhm.
The there It's not like IQ. EQ is fluid.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times I will end up working with people that have one area of emotional intelligence that is lagging behind the other components. Um, there was one woman I worked with several years ago, and it was all around self-management of her emotions. She was very fast-paced,
Mhm.
and if something wasn't working for her, she she could get really angry, um, be very frank and blunt, and tick people off.
Mhm.
And I worked with her, and she was really engaged in the process because she knew it was a problem. She admitted it was a problem. And since that time, she has gotten 3 promotions
Oh, that's
because
amazing and wonderful.
yeah, because when we were working together, she figured out techniques of how to slow down and the impact that it had. I mean, at one time I remember she had this issue with somebody in another department,
Mhm.
and I was like, you need to step up
Mhm.
and help fix this relationship.
Mhm.
And so we talked about it, and she went to the guy and had a conversation, connected with him. They found some things that they had some similarities
Mhm.
with, like kids or something like that.
Mhm.
And she now has this really great relationship with this guy.
Mhm.
It didn't happen overnight, but she took baby steps to start building and repairing that relationship.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's probably what kept her there. Like you said, that
Yeah,
one company earlier on, you left because of the manager. So just
right.
by healing that, 2 good employees
Right,
are staying and improving the company instead of leaving, going somewhere else.
exactly. Yep.
So yeah, yeah, I love that. Have you ever come across a time when you have a manager, and I'm thinking of this because right now my children who are in their 20s, a couple of them work at the same company,
Mhm.
and they have one of them has an awesome manager that they're working under. The other one has one that's just he's just not nice, and he doesn't listen, and you tell him, I need to do something different, or I need more people over here, and he just doesn't listen. So what do you do when you have a manager who you're talking to and they don't want to take those steps to and
Yeah.
their emotional intelligence?
Well, yeah. So that's what I call managing up and trying to manage your manager,
Mhm.
right? Versus it's easy to manage direct reports just from a reporting standpoint, not from a skill perspective. but having that conversation with the individual where you get curious with them. You know, I'm curious, you know, you said this or did this. What was it that caused you to do that? You know, it's trying to understand them better, because you can't fix them.
Right.
They need to be able to fix themselves. But if you can open their eyes to their behaviors in a way that's non-threatening, that maybe they will then be able to self-reflect and take some action.
Beautiful, because I think preserving the people at a company, as long as, you know, most people go to their jobs and they want to do a good job. So
Right.
preserving, you know, an employee that's been there, that has the experience, is, you know, optimal, as opposed to just firing people because, you know, they have some weaknesses that they might even see.
It's expensive. Turnover is expensive.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So, what I want to ask you next is just something more personal. For you, what gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life?
Oh gosh. There's a number of things. One is working with business owners who are really engaged in the process and grow with the process. Not just the business, but themselves. That, you know, they become a better leader. They're getting feedback from their employees in a positive way. It's having those coaching conversations where there's that aha moment, and somebody finally gets it. Those are really fulfilling. And then my family, my husband, and my 87-year-old mother, who's currently living with us. We pulled her out of her retirement community. I'm fortunate enough and blessed enough that she's in really good shape at 87, on no meds. She walks a mile a day. You know, she's easy. There's, you know, so that brings me joy.
That is wonderful that you can have that together.
Yeah.
Right now, especially right now. So
exactly.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So if people wanted to contact you or work with you, tell me, you know, who you actually work with, how they contact you, any services you have available.
Yeah, so my practice is focused in 3 areas. It's hiring great people, so that's helping them assess using assessment tools that we've talked about earlier. It's helping them create a hiring process that is consistent. It's something I find in smaller companies is that managers have never been taught on how to properly interview. And so that's kind of the hiring aspect. Then it's developing leaders, whether it be existing leaders or high potentials that are getting ready to move into leadership positions. And then succession planning, which usually is for companies that have 30 plus employees. And so they've got at least 2 levels of management. And I help them to define their core competencies, determine what potential is in the organization, what are the key positions, and then assess the people in those key positions, as well as the rest of the talent pool, to determine, okay, who are those high potentials that we should be developing to make sure that those key positions have successors in waiting.
And how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so 2 ways. One is through LinkedIn, and the easiest way to find me is using my full name, which is Beth Armknecht Miller, and I'll spell that. It's ARMKNECHT. So Beth Armknecht Miller. I'm the only one out there. And the other way is through my website, which is executive-velocity.com. I have a lot of complimentary resources out on the website that I encourage people to sign up for. They're grouped into hiring, leadership, and succession planning. I've got one on, figuring out how to determine high potential. Got a number of other tools out. I've got a load of tools out there. So
Wonderful.
I want people to benefit from them.
Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast today and for all your wisdom. And it's been a very interesting conversation. I learned a lot.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed our conversation.
Yes. So one last question before we get off. What to you is your best advice for people to live an incredible, amazing life?
Find and follow your passion.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.